Jeff Milber with NFM Lending. Oh, well, get out of my way. That caught me by surprise. Jeff Milber with NFM Lending. I've been doing mortgages for over 28 years now. And one thing that comes up right now in this market is there's a lot of investors out there hunting for houses, selling houses, and we hear a lot of people wondering what are the best options if I'm going to sell a rental and want to buy something else. What are the best options for investors to take advantage of? And one of the best options out there, a little loophole in IRS code, is the 1031 exchange. I get calls on this all the time. We've offered many classes in the past that always have great show ups for clients and realtors alone at the same time. And one guy that I always refer my clients to is Kyle Williams over here at IPX. He's been amazing. The dude knows this stuff. He teaches it very well to make it understandable, and he's a great resource to go to get your 1031 exchange started and walk you through the whole process as well. So without further ado, super excited to have you on. Kyle Williams, take it away, brother.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeff. Kelsey, do you want to jump in and say anything real quick before we get started? I know you want to.
No, you've got it handled. Jeff is the rock star, and
Yes.
Kyle Williams is my brother from another mother.
Yes.
Just true story though. We share the same birthday, so we are twins, and he's younger than me,
Yes.
so that makes me his same age. But really quick, Kelsey Myers, Fidelity National Title, and the cool thing about IPX 1031 Exchange is that they are backed by Fidelity National Financial Group. So when you're working with IPX 1031 Exchange, you are working with a company that is very reputable and that can handle your funds appropriately. So I think that Kyle can explain 1031 exchange better than anyone out in the business, and take it away, dude. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate it. I actually met Jeff a number of years ago through Kelsey when we started doing classes. Jeff does probably more than anyone on education and everything. So I always enjoy the classes, always good turnout, good participation. And really, speaking of participation, jump in and ask questions as you have them. I'm going to save some time at the end for Q&A, but I've done this presentation more times than I can count, so it doesn't do me any good to just kind of ramble through. So if I'm speaking too quickly, if I'm losing you, if I'm not explaining something clearly, just stop me, jump in, ask questions as you have them, because it's really for you guys to do. 1031. So 1031s are outside the scope of your licensing. You take on things when you discuss, you take on something when you discuss things outside the scope of your licensing. It's called liability, right? So our job is to work with the client's CPAs, attorneys if need be, escrow, lenders, a broker, anyone involved, and provide them with assistance throughout the exchange. Most important thing to remember today, call me or email me with questions as you guys have them. There's no dumb questions, so always feel free to reach out at any time because you don't have to be experts in 1031s. We are the experts in 1031s. And at the end of the day, 1031s are really, I would say, the best kept marketing secret in the entire real estate industry. A lot of agents and brokers, even a lot of investors don't really understand 1031s, or maybe have never done a 1031 themselves. It's the greatest wealth building tool in the Internal Revenue Code because there's nothing else outside of 1031 that allows you to buy and sell assets over the course of your entire life and never pay taxes. Some people will say, well, Kyle, what about like my IRA or my 401k? Isn't that the same thing? Not really, because with Section Code 1031, you're buying and selling real estate, but you're collecting income along the way too. Whereas like with your retirement account, if you have a dividend paying stock, we'll say like Exxon, for example, that's all reinvested. But with 1031s and with real estate, you're collecting income. You're supplementing your own income through real estate along the way. Unfortunately, 1031 is one of the most underused parts of the tax code as well. As I mentioned, a lot of agents and brokers, a lot of investors, really not a lot of people truly understand 1031s. Even a lot of CPAs don't understand 1031s. So a 1031 exchange, the most basic definition I've ever come up with is it allows an investor to use all the equity when they sell their investment property, not just after-tax equity, to reinvest into something bigger and better. With 1031s, you're repositioning real estate assets throughout your entire life and never paying taxes. The word exchange can throw people off. And one of the most common questions I get is, Kyle, like, this is exchange, it's like a deed swap, right? No, it's not. So 1031 used to be that way, hasn't been that way for a long time. I'm not going to get into this history lesson right now, but 1031 used to be a deed swap. That's where you get the word exchange from. Hasn't been that way for a long time. So most exchanges are three-party exchanges. Like, I'm one party, I'm the exchanger, I'm selling to a second party, buying from a third party. Any questions so far on what a 1031 is? No? Okay, awesome. So investor clients, working with the investor market. 1031 clients are less emotional. I always tell this story in my classes, but when I bought my first house, this is like 2005, it was a super emotional decision for me. Like, I didn't even know what an inspection was, but my agent told me I had to get an inspection. And so, like, when we got the inspection report back, like, I lost it because there were so many things wrong with the house, but they were all little things. This was like any other inspection. It's just, he didn't brace me for what an inspection report would look like. So I started yelling at my agent in the house and told him I was going to fire him and work with someone else and da-da-da-da. And like, I was crazy. I was super emotional, right? Like, you guys all know people like that, where you wonder, like, why am I even working with this person? My life would be so much easier if I didn't. But that's like the majority of your clients. They're buying primary residences, so they're emotional. They may not be crazy, but they're emotional. Investor clients, much less emotional, because what do they care about? Bottom line, right? Money. Even investors with their own even with their own primary residence, much more emotional than they are when they're buying an investment property, because with the investment property, they're looking at bottom line. I know investors that won't even look at pictures of properties before they buy a property. Like, they'll actually just get an inspection. They'll look at numbers, they'll look at cap rate, everything like that. They don't want to be tied into anything emotional and say, oh yeah, that's a cute house. And now they're starting to become emotional over the property. So 1031 investor clients, much less emotional. 1031 clients are also motivated. After they close on their sale, they have a short amount of time, 45 days, to identify new property to purchase. They will never be those clients where you've shown them every property from Stanwood down to Kent, and like nothing ever works for them. Like, you've spent basically, years of your life trying to help these people find property. Their offers suck. They're just, it's like a fruitless search for you. 1031 clients, as soon as they find something that pencils out, they're going to make an aggressive offer because they need to buy that property. They are super good to work with in that sense. Multiple transactions. So it is not uncommon for us to see clients sell one property, especially if they've owned it for a long time and have a lot of equity, and maybe buy like 2 or 3 others. Super common to do. My best friend, his parents bought their first primary residence on Queen Anne in 1971, about 50 years ago. Big lot, like small house, but they paid $25,000 for it. Crazy, right? For a half-acre house on lot with a house on Queen Anne. So, but they moved out of it a number of years later. Actually, not that long afterwards. But it had been a rental this entire time, and they never did any upkeep with it or anything. And a few years ago, they got an unsolicited offer, like $1.6 million for a teardown on Queen Anne. So obviously they took it, but it was all equity. Like, there was no debt tied to the property at all. So they took that and they put that down on like an approximately $5 million multifamily down in like South King County. So that is just one example of people using leverage. In situations like that, it's not uncommon for people to buy like multiple properties. And as you guys know, $1 million transactions are like the norm. They're not, transactions over that are almost uncommon. So when you see people using equity and using leverage at $1.5 million to buy $4 or $5 million worth of new property, that's pretty common. So you guys are not only helping clients, you're getting paid handsomely for it too, to help these clients grow their portfolios. Um, by the way, does anyone know how long the average is right now that someone will buy and sell, basically live in their primary residence?
5 years?
Yeah, so it was 5 to 7 a number of years ago. Then it went to 7 to 10, and then with COVID and stuff, it's back down closer to 5 years because so many people have been moving. The average investor, though, they move up depending on the market. It's pretty regular, though. You can have clients that, in a hot market, they're moving up and adjusting their portfolio, once, twice, 3 times a year. In a down market, they might slow down, but anytime you can show an investor a better performing property than their worst, or something that just stands out, they're going to tell you, listen, sell that property. Let's put an offer on this one. Again, that might be, multiple times a year, might be once every couple of years, but it's going to be more often in most circumstances than the average person buying and selling their primary residence. I don't tell you this to say, oh yeah, don't work with people buying their primary residences. That's your bread and butter. But having a little side book of investors definitely helps, especially in down markets. Like those of you that were in the business, in 2008, what is it, almost 15 years ago now, it's crazy, but 2009, 2010, like it felt like Armageddon. Like it just seemed like nothing was really moving, and it was just a weird, crazy time. But there were a lot of investors that had cash that were buying up properties, at deep discounts. So during the next down market, whenever that is, if we're at the start of a bear market, I'm not saying that it's going to drop like it did 12 years ago or 14 years ago, or even if it's going to drop now. But real estate is cyclical, so the market will go down at some point. But who's going to be buying up properties when the market goes down? It's going to be investors. So, continue to work with people buying their primary residence. Again, I get it, at your bread and butter, but start trying to work with investors where you can. Get in networking groups. There's a ton of investor networking groups on Facebook. Just get into that community and really start to get referrals, start to get business. I know it's easier said than done, but try to work with investors where you can is the point. So why now? Interest rates comes up. It comes up with us probably almost as often as it comes up with you guys. Maybe not as often as with Jeff's team and lenders, but it's coming up quite a bit. When my parents bought their first primary residence, not long after I was born, I think they bought it in '81. Do you know what their interest rate was? It was like 17%. And it was like, a government loan through my dad, a couple points below the market. So people don't understand, especially a lot of younger people, don't understand what interest rates look like historically. Like if you ask most millennials, they think it's their God-given right to get a 3% mortgage every day for the rest of their lives. Like it's written in the Constitution or something. They don't understand what's going on now. But realistically, like a 6.5% investment loan, that's below a long-term average, right? Like that's still low. And so when I talk to investors about this, it's something they need to talk to their lender about, talk to their financial advisor. But 6.5%. What if rates really spike over the next 18 months, and a year and a half from now, investment rate is 9.5 or 10%? You really would have wished that you would have locked in 6.5% when you could. But let's say the interest rates go back down, right? There's a lot of people that think rates are going to head back down once the Fed stops hiking. We don't know. But what if you can get an investment loan for 4% in 18 months? Then refinance it. Lock in that lower rate then. So we don't discourage people. Obviously, they can only afford what they can afford, and interest rates factor into that if they don't have cash. But it should definitely not be a deterrent if people are trying to time the interest rate market. They never will. Even the Fed doesn't know what's going to happen with interest rates, right? So how are any of us going to know? I mentioned a couple minutes ago about cash investors buying up in dips and downturns. I can tell you that really since COVID started, there's been a lot of investors that are waiting for a downturn, and they don't know when that's going to happen, but they've been building cash positions. And so there are a ton of investors right now that are just waiting and really foaming at the mouth for a downturn so they can start buying stuff on the cheap. These single family starter homes in Bothell for $1.3 million. It's hard to pencil that out as an investment property, right? Once you start figuring out rents and everything. So they're hoping that they can buy it for $900,000, that there's a deep downturn and they can buy it for $900,000 or $1 million, which I don't know if they will, but there's plenty of investors that have cash waiting for a downturn to do that. So again, work with investors where you can. I can't stress that enough. If you guys ever want to do an investor class, like a Zoom, or we can even do in person, like on a Tuesday night at like 7. I'm more than happy to help you guys if you guys want to do that. A ton of investors want to know about 1031. So if you work with investor clients already, they would probably love a 1031 class on Thursday night or something. So get with me afterwards. Let me know if you're interested in something like that. And I'm more than happy to do something similar to what we're doing today. Okay, we look at some numbers here. When I ask clients about tax rates, I'm like, you know what you'll pay in taxes when they inquire about 1031s, just to see if they've done their due diligence or anything, where they're at. They'll say, oh, I don't know, I think I'll probably pay 10%. Some will say 15%, but a lot of people say 10% for some reason. Well, capital gains is 15 to 20. If you've owned an investment property for any length of time in the Puget Sound area, you're probably going to be paying closer to 20%. There's also depreciation recapture. We call this a hidden tax because most people don't know about it until they've been hit by it. But the tax write-off of depreciation, basically you're writing off amount every year based upon the value of the structure of your rental, for example. It's the number one tax benefit to even owning real estate is being able to write off depreciation, huge tax benefit. But all that depreciation that you've written off on your taxes is taxed at 25%. Lastly, we have the affordable healthcare tax, better known as the Obamacare tax of 3.8%, really on top of both of those. So when we hear clients say, oh yeah, I think I'll pay 10 or 15%, it's like, talk to your CPA, because most likely you'll probably pay double that. You'll probably pay 25%, maybe even higher than that. Many investors will look at 25% as just a starting point. Some will even assume 30% and know they're on the high end and work back from there. So yeah, if your clients ever say, oh yeah, I don't think I'm going to do a 1031, I'm just going to cash out, I'll only pay 10%, make sure they talk to their CPA. I mean, I'm more than happy to talk to them, but make sure they know exactly what they're doing when they talk to their CPA. Okay, so on the left-hand side here, we're going to look at cashing out and reinvesting versus doing a 1031 exchange. So this is all super self-explanatory. On the left-hand side, we don't know about this 1031 thing. We're just going to sell our rental for $1 million and pay our taxes and reinvest when we can. So if we pay 25% taxes, there's $250,000 out the door. Leaves us $750,000 and a 75% LTV, buys us $3 million new property. That's great. We're building our real estate portfolios, but we pay taxes. On the right, we just would have done a 1031 and invested all of it. That $3 million turns into $4 million. The difference on $1 million of income is astronomical. I mean, that could be $1 million in itself over the next 20, 30, 35 years. Think of the appreciation on top of that extra $1 million too over that time frame. Just because you did a 1031, it's astronomical. So a lot of people at 1031s that look into 1031s come to the conclusion, hey, I'm not really eliminating taxes, I'm only deferring taxes, right? We all had Grandpa who said 2 things in life are inevitable. What are they? Death and taxes, right? Well, only one of those is, because guess what? We have the taxing figured out. Your heirs got to step up in cost basis when you pass. So everything goes to your heirs tax-free, like up to 11.2 million per spouse at the federal level. So if you and your spouse, were to pass today, you're passing on $22 million worth of stuff to your heirs tax-free at the federal level. Washington State has its own weird little estate tax, but at the federal level, it's very, very favorable for most people. 99.8% of people are never affected by the federal estate tax levels. So agents and brokers, don't let your clients cash out of real estate. Just help them exchange into something that better hits their goals, right? We came up with a phrase a few years ago to make sure people never forget this concept. Are you guys ready? It's called swap until you drop. Yes, exchange forever. All right, like-kind property. So like-kind property, any type of property you can exchange into and out of and into. So all these things are like-kind with one another. There is no difference between the Space Needle and 50,000 acres of raw land in Montana. It's all the same from a 1031, from an IRS perspective. It's all investment property. A lot of landowners, like they all seem to have the same story. They've owned land for like 30 or 40 years, and it's made money because basically everything in real estate's gone up over that time. So if you ask them, hey, have you thought about selling this land? They say, what am I going to do? Sell it, pay taxes, and buy something just as expensive? I might as well just hold it, right? Most landowners don't know they can do 1031 exchanges. 1031 exchanges are huge for landowners. That way they can actually exchange into something where they collect income, where they get depreciation, which is the #1 tax benefit to even owning investment real estate. Where can you get a list of landowners from? This is Kelsey's plug. Yes. Yes. Talk to Kelsey, get a list of landowners. In fact, speaking of, so, as we mentioned, we're the exchange division for Fidelity National Financial. I can tell you Fidelity puts a ton of money and resources into marketing for agents and brokers. So if you guys don't utilize Kelsey for that, you guys are crazy. It's a huge missed opportunity. Every time I talk to her, there's new tools they have and everything to work with people, with investors, people buying primary residences, everything for agents and brokers. So please work with them, not just with landowners, but really all your business. Eminent domain. So if you guys see eminent domain come up, this is where like the government comes in, takes your property for some public works projects, say like light rail, gives you fair market value. They do what's called a 1033. It's nothing you have to know or understand, but it's all self-reporting. They have a couple years to do the exchange, but like kind means like kind when it comes to eminent domain. This is nothing that we would help them with. It's all self-reporting on their taxes, so they'd want to work with their CPA on it. Any questions on like kind?
We have a couple. So the first was just clarifying you don't pay any capital gains on primary residence, like none.
So you do, well, you can. I'll get into primary residences though in a little bit.
Okay. So then on like kind, they were asking clarification, thinking it was the same category, and surprised that you can do single family into commercial.
Yeah. So yeah, you can exchange industrial for single family for land. It's I mean anything that's basically not personal use would probably qualify. So like in this slide, you can see partnership interests are a big one too. So like you can't exchange into a syndication because you're really buying an interest in that syndication. You're not buying real property. Whereas like you could buy tenants in common with other people. Like, we could all buy a building together. We're just tenants in common. We're not in a partnership together. So partnership interests, not exchangeable. Personal use properties, not exchangeable. REITs are not exchangeable as well. So primary residences, the primary residence exclusion. So this has nothing to do with 1031s. This is for personal use, primary residences. As long as you live in the primary residence for 2 of the last 5 years, you get $250,000 tax-free if you're single, $500,000 tax-free if you're married. That's awesome. That's even better than a 1031. If you're over the 500,000, let's say you have a married couple and they just made $600,000 on their property. 500,000 of that is tax-free, and then they would pay tax on 100,000. So, you know, yeah, there's going to be plenty of people that are over that 250 or 500,000, but still, the 250 or 500,000 is tax-free money. You don't have to do an exchange with it or anything. In fact, you can't do an exchange on a primary residence, but it's just tax-free money. Any questions on this? The primary residence exclusion? Okay, if you guys think of anything, we'll save some time at the end for questions too. Okay, vacation homes and conversions. This is kind of a cool one. This is a revenue procedure that was released in 2008, almost 15 years ago, but it's really just started to gain a lot of traction recently. Like I'd say, really since COVID started. So you can actually sell your investment properties and exchange into your dream home. I know you guys are like, well, you just said that you can't exchange into a personal use property. Well, you can't immediately. You have to go through a conversion process. So let's say that you want to sell your rentals, exchange into a dream home on the lake. So the first 2 years after you do an exchange into that dream home, you need to rent it out for at least 14 days a year for each of the first 2 years, and limit your own personal use to 14 days a year or less for each of those first 2 years. And that's it. After 2 years, you can move into it, do with it whatever you want. Retirees will do this. You know, they'll exchange out of their rentals, buy their dream home on Lake Sammamish, rent it out for a couple of years, and then after that, move into that, make it their forever home. And then they're eventually going to pass it on to their heirs tax-free and never pay taxes. That's amazing, right? And it doesn't even have to be rented full time, because a lot of people, if this is their dream home, the last thing they want are tenants in there, right? So like, if this was me, I could call Kelsey and say, Kelsey, you know, you and your husband need to rent this from me 2 weeks this year, 2 weeks next year. I've satisfied that requirement. That's it. As long as I stay out of there, I'm good. And then after 24 months, I can move into it, do with it whatever I want. Okay, I'm going to cover one of these real quick. So I'm going to cover the last one because the inevitable question that comes up after I talk about converting to a primary residence, a lot of people say, well, Kyle, how's the IRS going to know like if I'm there for less than 2 weeks a year, or that I rent it out, or anything like that? So one case happened a little over 5 years ago. The case of Cheryl Savage answers that question. So Cheryl is actually a real estate broker in Northern California, and she owned a bunch of rentals in the area. And what Cheryl did is she sold a couple of her rentals, did a 1031 exchange into her dream home on the ocean. She didn't want to wait 2 years to move in like the revenue procedure says to do. She moved in right away. She got caught. And you're like, well, how did she get caught? You know, it seems tough to do. Well, she was using one of her tenants' addresses as her primary residence address. So the IRS actually had sent her some letters, and the tenant picked up the phone and called the IRS and said, hey, Cheryl doesn't live here. Here's your actual address. And it was the address where she shouldn't have been living in. So you think like, oh yeah, well, that's probably not a big deal. She paid a fine or whatever. She paid a multi-million-dollar fine, and she went to federal prison just for moving in early on a 1031 exchange. She didn't try to fight it. She actually pled guilty. This isn't one of those cases where, you know, she refused a plea deal or anything. Like, she was at their mercy. They still sent her to federal prison, and she still ended up with a multi-million-dollar fine and tax bill. Crazy. So we tell people, you know, just follow IRS guidelines with everything you're doing. There's no reason, because there's plenty of people I talk to that, you know, they tell me that they get very aggressive with the tax code and make sure their CPA gets very aggressive. And it's like, well, I don't sign your tax return. I'm not your CPA, but just be careful. You know, there's the IRS is one of those agencies where just follow the rules. You don't want to get on their bad side. Another not like kind property would be inventory. So this is like builders. So this is why DR Horton or Pulte or KB Now the home builders do 1031 exchanges. That's inventory for them. That's their business. Flips also don't qualify. Clients need to hold for what's called long-term intent. What does long-term intent mean? The IRS has actually never defined it. So it's up to the CPA to determine long-term intent. We've seen cases where clients have held as long as 3 years. Did a 1031, was thrown out in federal tax court. So with 1031s and holding period, yeah, you can hold for 3 years, like that case we saw. This husband and wife thought they were getting a smoking deal on a house. The next day after they closed on it, on their purchase, they relisted it, jacked the price up, and it sat there vacant for 3 years. You know, they'd taken it off the market, put it back on. It was just a mess. They didn't get the deal they thought they were getting. So after 3 years, when they sold the property, they filed that as a 1031 exchange, and the IRS threw it out. And they challenged the IRS and they lost because their long-term intent wasn't to hold it for business or investment use, it was to flip it. So they lost in federal tax court. We've seen cases where clients have held for like 90 days, literally 3 months, had valid 1031s. And that comes down to like clients getting unsolicited offers where they're planning to like rent out a property or, you know, put a business in, and they just get an unsolicited offer. And it's like, well, I'd be a fool not to take this. You know, this developer offered me X. And generally their CPAs will say, yeah, your intent was to hold long-term. You know, you got an offer that nobody would say no to. Of course you can take that and do a 1031. So when it comes down to length of ownership, it all comes down to CPA guidance. Many CPAs will say, if you hold for a year and get some rent on it, some sort of business or investment use that you can show, you're probably okay. More conservative CPAs may say, wait for 2 years just to be safe and remove all doubt. But again, it comes down to intent. If you or your clients have any questions, definitely refer to the CPA on what they're comfortable with. Okay, nuts and bolts of 1031s, time frames. So, day 0 on the exchange, close of escrow. That means you have to set up your exchange before close of escrow. I cannot stress this enough. We get calls all the time from clients that want to set up a 1031 exchange. They'll call me, you know, this afternoon and say, Kyle, I need to set up a 1031, da 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 da. I'll say, where's escrow? And they'll say, oh, you know, we closed on Monday. Well, it's too late to do a 1031. They'll say, no, I know we can't hold money, but we haven't gotten a check. It doesn't matter. If you've closed, as soon as the burdens and benefits of ownership have been transferred, it's too late to do a 1031 exchange at that point. From close of escrow, that starts the 45 and 180-day clocks, which I'll talk about now. From close of escrow, they have 45 days to identify new property to purchase. Well, what does that mean? It means let us know in writing what they intend on purchasing. There are 3 rules of identification. You can use one of these 3 rules. The first rule, the 3 property rule. Clients can identify up to 3 properties of any value, but only 3. If that rule doesn't work, if they want to identify 5 or 6 properties, they go to the next rule, the 200% rule. Meaning they can identify up to 200% of any value to purchase. So for example, they sell for 1.1 million, they can identify any number of properties totaling up to 2.2 million. Lastly, the 95% exception rule. If they don't want to cap on anything, if they just want to be able to identify the entire city of Redmond, they can do that. The catch is, though, that they have to close on 95% of what they identify. Otherwise, the entire exchange has failed and everything is taxable. So most clients won't use that last rule. That's more for like, they're going to buy a portfolio and just buy the whole portfolio or walk away and pay the taxes. Otherwise, the 3 property rule is probably the most common, with the 200% rule behind that. Any questions on identification? No? Okay. So 45 days to identify, 180 days to close. Keep in mind, these are calendar days. So Saturdays, Sundays, legal holidays, don't extend the 45 or the 180. So if you have identified and you want to close on a new build as your replacement property, and day 180 is on a Sunday, you better make sure that you close by day 178 because you're not closing on the weekend. So again, keep in mind these are count days and there are not extensions outside of federally declared disasters. These are not common either. So it's not like, there's federally declared disasters issued every day. It's super, super uncommon. You have to be directly affected by one to get any sort of extension. So basically we tell clients they're not extensions to 1031s. Clients always need to use someone like us, an exchange facilitator, a qualified intermediary for 1031 exchanges. Even if they're closing on their sale and the purchase, like basically simultaneously, they still need a 1031 qualified intermediary. There's actually a court case, and we put this case up on our website now because so many clients will ask, like, oh yeah, I can just do the 1031 myself. You can't, because this guy tried to do it. You always have to have a qualified intermediary for your 1031 exchange, even if you're closing on your sale and the purchase in the same day. All right, nitty gritty, 1031. So luckily with 1031s, there's really just two rules: buy for equal or greater value and reinvest your proceeds. That's it. That's all you have to do. So if you sell for $1 million and have 600,000 proceeds, yeah, you want to buy for at least $1 million and reinvest your 600,000 in proceeds. That's it. That's all you have to do. The third rule about replacing debt gets really confusing. If you look at that, replace value of the debt that was on the relinquished property by placing a loan on the replacement, it gets super confusing, right? Like everyone gets confused by that. So I tell everyone, as long as you do the first two things, buy for equal or greater value and reinvest your proceeds, everything else just falls into place from a math standpoint. So trying to keep things simple, that's really all they need to do. All right, mixed use exchanges. Give me a minute. It's very, very difficult to talk consecutively for like 40 minutes. Unless you've done it, you have no idea. So I need to take a little break. That's why I've been drinking so much water.
I don't think that's water, Kyle.
No, it's a tequila sunrise, actually. But no, someone asked me if I could do a 3-hour class on Zoom, and I was like, I don't think you've ever even done a 30-minute class on Zoom. Otherwise, you wouldn't ask me to do a 3-hour class. It would be impossible to talk for 3 hours straight. Okay, mixed use exchanges. Duplex. So if I have a duplex and I live in one half and rent out the other half, then the half I live in, I'll take the 250 or 500,000 on. The half I rent out, I'll do the 1031 on. Whatever that value is that I rent out, that's what I'll do the exchange on. If you have a mother-in-law unit in back, whatever the value is of that mother-in-law unit, you will do a 1031 exchange on that. So if the ADU is worth 270,000, that's what you do the exchange on. Mixed use house. If I have an old Victorian and live in the downstairs and rent out the upstairs, whatever the values of the upstairs that I rent out, that's what I would do the exchange on. Really, it's probably going to be the percentage of the property that I'm depreciating on my taxes. Your CPA may say, yeah, just get a broker's opinion of value and we'll call that good. So super easy. Y1031 diversification. This is very, very common sense. Consolidating, especially as people get older, they may move from like residential to commercial. They may move to like a DST just because it's easier for them to manage. State, so moving markets. I can tell you that it seems like so many exchangers are moving markets right now out of state. We see quite a few exchangers come into the state. They're all from Northern California though. But other than that, yeah, there's people coming in, people moving out. Very common reason people 1031. All right, estate planning. So this is very, very cool. So this 99-year-old guy comes into our office. And how do we know he's 99? He told us. Like literally the first thing he said when he came into the office is, I'm 99, damn it, somebody help me. So that's what people who are 99 do, is they announce their age when they enter the rooms. So this 99-year-old guy comes into our office. This is down in California a few years ago. And his issue is that he had an expensive piece of property. Like he'd bought a piece of land in the Bay Area, like, literally 80 years earlier, like before he'd gone into the service or anything. And he bought it for like less than $1,000. I think it was like $600 or $700. And it was worth about $3 million. Like, that's crazy. And so he had 3 kids and he wanted to plan out his estate, but his kids had been fighting their entire lives. And he knew that when he died, those kids would fight over that expensive piece of property. By the way, he called them kids. They were like 75 years old. It was so weird. So this guy and his kids, like, he didn't really know what to do. So luckily he was referred to us. But what he ended up doing in the long run is that he sold that property for, approximately, we'll round and say $3 million. So each of the 3 kids got roughly $1 million after he did the 1031 exchange to find a property, identify a property, and close on that property. Everything went into a revocable living trust, so that way it would pass on to the heirs tax-free when he died, and they'd have their property picked out for him. So obviously this is not something you have to remember, but there's a lot of cool stuff you can do with 1031s. It's more than just buying and selling real estate. There's a lot of stuff that we won't even scratch the surface on today that you can do with 1031s. Reverse exchanges. Reverse exchanges. So what we've been talking about, a delayed exchange, whatever you want to call it, forward exchange, traditional exchange, any number of names to it. But the essence is that you close on a sale first, then you close on a purchase. In the reverse exchange, everything flips around. You close on a purchase first, then you have 180 days to close on your sale. This is a completely different type of 1031, because in a normal 1031, we just hold funds. It's fairly easy to do for most people. In the reverse exchange, we actually have to take title to that property. There's non-recourse language that would be required to hold the property. We have to file an LLC with the state to hold title to that property. Basically, clients can't get a traditional loan, so they need to have cash to do it, or they'd have to get a hard money loan, which would be very expensive to do. They wouldn't be able to refi into a traditional loan until they've actually closed on their sale. So a normal exchange it's less than $1,000. A reverse exchange would start at like 6,000 to 7,000, and definitely could be more depending on the type of property, price, location, stuff like that. So we don't encourage anyone, oh yeah, just do a reverse exchange. That's an easy way to go, because it is complicated and expensive. That being said, if a client needs to close on a purchase first, that's why it's here. But again, don't ever encourage your clients, oh yeah, just do a reverse exchange. It's super easy. Well, not necessarily. DST, so Delaware Statutory Trust. This is kind of a cool thing. That's another thing that's really been coming up more and more the last couple of years. So Delaware Statutory Trust is commercial property. It could be a single property. It could be like an Amazon warehouse, or it could be a number of like, triple net lease properties, like say Walgreens, Starbucks, AutoZones. It could be multifamily. It could be any number of things. But DSTs are 100% passive. They're technically securities. So if you have a client who wants to buy into a DST or exchange into a DST, they'd have to work with an investment advisor that specifically handles those types of investments. There's nothing that we would encourage people to buy. I mean, we're a disinterested party, so we don't ever push people into DSTs. But you're like, well, why should we talk about DSTs? We don't get paid on them or anything. Well, you get listings you would have never gotten before. Because a lot of your older investor clients, if you're not talking to them about DSTs, somebody else will. So DSTs, nothing you guys have to know like in depth, but know from a 40,000 foot view, especially if you work with older investors. Connect them with someone who does an investment advisor that does DSTs. If you want to learn more, I can connect you with local investment advisors that do those. But DSTs are not going away. They make a lot of sense for a lot of people, but definitely something you should at least know from a 40,000 foot view. Let's see. By the way, did you guys know Starbucks doesn't own any real estate? Like they don't even own their own headquarters. In downtown Seattle, it's like, how is that even possible? They don't own real estate. Yeah, so like some of these companies like Walgreens or CVS, AutoZones, we'll see these in like the DSTs because all their portfolios are triple net lease. Like Amazon will have, Amazon leases some properties, but they also own quite a bit of real estate and they really don't sell real estate either. Okay, 1031s. Anyone know who regulates the 1031 industry? Any guesses? So, yeah, nobody regulates 1031s. 1031s, you guys are regulated as agents and brokers, lenders, title, and escrow. I mean, everyone's heavily regulated except 1031s. Literally billions of dollars have been lost. So you have to be super careful who you work with. Fidelity is the by far the industry leader in 1031s with the highest level of security and protection. So you can always feel comfortable referring to us from a liability standpoint. Your clients will always be in good hands, and most importantly, their money will not be lost. So at the end of the day, again, always feel comfortable referring to us, asking questions, reach out to us for all 1031 inquiries. There is my contact information where looks like we're under an hour, but yeah, there's quite a bit in the chat. I don't know, Sky, if you and Kelsey have been answering any of this, but yeah, more than happy to answer any questions. So please jump in as if you guys have any questions.
Okay, a couple from Mark Nouse, who works with our people over. He's a certified financial planner.
Okay.
He was asking, are there client suitability concerns when processing a 1031? We can start there.
Good question. So not like there is in your world, right? Because if clients buy, a mutual fund, it's like, well, this client's 95 years old. Why is she in the aggressive growth tech fund? That's a suitability concern because that outweighs her risk. With a 1031, they're really just selling and buying investment property. When it comes to like DSTs, Delaware Statutory Trusts, where that is technically a security, even though it's real property you own, there are definitely suitability requirements for DSTs. But yeah, in terms of suitability, that's really up to the agent and broker, their CPA, their financial advisor, to determine what makes the most sense for them. Because yeah, when it comes to leverage, I know there's a lot of agents and brokers and even some bad lenders out there that have pushed their clients into over leveraging themselves. I mean, that's a suitability concern for me. Clients who take on too much leverage because their broker agent said, oh yeah, this is a good idea, put 15% down on 10 different houses and leverage yourself to the hills. Like that doesn't turn out good. So that's where there would be suitability issues, is things like that, leverage primarily.
Cool. Okay, similar vein. So if a client has some losses in their stock portfolio, can they realize those losses to offset capital gains on the sale of their home?
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
I don't even know what that means, Mark.
Yeah, so yeah, it's basically like, I mean, from a very 40,000 foot view, it's your gains and losses, can they weigh each other out? Yes, they can when it comes to real estate. So yeah, some clients, like this year they may be selling a property and it's like, oh, we have a $70,000 gain. Well, we also have 85,000 in losses in stocks this year. So we probably don't even need to do a 1031 exchange. We'll actually take a net loss this year. So yeah, this is another thing that we would refer to the financial advisor, the CPA, talk to them and figure out, if it makes sense.
Cool. Okay, any costs associated with 1035? Or was it 1033?
Oh, 1033, eminent domain. 1031. Yeah, so 1031, it's just under $1,000. That covers the sale, the purchase, and all the insurance policies that Fidelity will provide for the exchange.
Sweet. Okay, there was one in here, and this was a question I had as well. Are there going to be any changes to laws around 1031? I know there was some stuff on your website regarding like if you wanted to get involved in making sure
Yes.
that the changes
Yes.
don't happen. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, good question. So, I mean, so I don't want to, I mean, this isn't a political issue. I mean, I guess it is, but yeah, the current administration has made no bones about wanting to get rid of 1031s and, you know, what they would call real estate loopholes. But that being said, I mean, Trump got rid of a large part of 1031, which was personal property. Personal property 1031s were an even bigger market than the real estate 1031s. And Trump got rid of those. So it's not really like a partisan issue. But at the end of the day, you know, when it comes to real estate, it's like, I mean, even Bernie Sanders owns multiple properties. You know, all these guys and, you know, gals own, you know, probably own investment properties and probably own a lot of investment properties. Their donors own investment properties and commercial properties. So it's like everyone who's at the trough, you know, is involved in real estate. And so I just don't see them cutting off their nose to spite their face. Again, anything could happen this day and age. You know, we'd encourage everyone to reach out to your congressperson. But 1031 itself is the greatest wealth building tool for the middle class. Because even if, say, like Donald Trump does a 1031 exchange and saves, you know, $5 million in taxes, it's like, yeah, that might be more than like the young millennial couple you work with that does a 1031 exchange and saves $35,000 in taxes. But the tax savings for that young millennial couple that's building their nest egg and growing their wealth go a lot further for them than they do the real estate mogul that saves, you know, millions of dollars. So we definitely say that, yeah, although people like that do take advantage of 1031, you know, wealthy real estate people, you know, the 99%, the middle class, is primarily who the greatest beneficiaries of Section Code 1031 are.
Awesome. Okay, can we do a 1031 exchange for selling of primary residence?
Yeah, you cannot. So you'd have to take the 250 or 500,000 primary residence exclusion, assuming you live there at least 2 of the last 5 years.
Okay. Perfect. Thanks for clarifying that. I'm curious, like speaking of sort of the young millennial couple, imagine, you know, they own one property. Given what you know, what would be like the next 2 moves you would make to be able to start building that real estate portfolio and renting some things out and leveraging this tool?
So, okay, so I think about this all the time. And what's crazy is like, there's a lot of real estate investors I know now that own a lot of real estate. Like I'm talking like, you know, hundreds, if not thousands of doors at this point. And they're like younger than I am, but they all have different stories on how they got there. You know, like you talk to one person, they're like, oh, you know, I did this, 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 and this. And the other person like did the total opposite and grew their wealth. So that's what's really cool about investment real estate is like, you know, there's people reinvent the wheel every day and it works. You know, I guess the one thing I can say that I've seen enough and from personal experiences, don't ever over leverage. That's like, you know, if you time everything correctly, like let's say that you took on leverage in 2010 and really started to scale back in 2020. It's like, yeah, you probably did pretty well with that, but you timed everything perfectly. And 99 times out of 100, you're not going to time the market correctly, right? So just from going back to 2008 and everything, I would say that, you know, the best advice I've seen other investors do is, you know, take their time, you know, don't over leverage yourself when you're moving up. Some leverage is good, but not over leveraging yourself and taking on more than you can, more than you should risk.
Cool. Do we have any other questions? Feel free to just unmute and jump in here. No.
No?
I do have a question. What about for FHA? Is that acceptable and will we get assistance from 1031?
If they, yeah, so the loan type doesn't matter for Section Code 1031. Does FHA do investment loans?
No. Government loans, you can't do investment.
Yeah, so in second home, when people try to sneak by second home loans, but those will get held up. They're not, they need to be investment loans because you're buying it as an investment property. So yeah, you can talk to like your lender and your financial advisor, but yeah, people in 1031s need to buy investment loans because, you know, like the underwriters, and this has happened before, someone will try to sneak like a second home loan buy or primary residence loan because they're getting a lower rate. And then the day before closing, the underwriter's like, hey, we didn't know this was a 1031. You can't get this loan with a 1031. So, you know, it's just a mess. Go through the normal vehicles and get an investment loan.
Good question though.
Be glad it's not me. No.
If you ever want to try it without, let me know.
No, Janice is an expert.
I'm
What-
not sure
what?
if that was a question or just
Yeah.
a snippet
You guys
of
are
a
off
very
mute.
intriguing conversation.
Yeah.
All right, cool guys.
So,
Thank you.
Sorry,
so
I just had one more question.
Sure.
So, say a client sells their $1.5 million home here in Seattle and wants to go buy like 5 homes down in Alabama for $200,000 each.
Mhm.
That you're looking at the 200% rule in that situation.
Correct.
Is
Yeah,
that right?
absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And I mean, there's a ton of people that buy in the South and they're the ones who use the 200% rule. Yep.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
Yep.
all right, last chance. We have 1 minute.
I have that question.
Sure.
So does it apply to international property or just within the United States if we use the?
So technically you can exchange international for international and domestic for domestic, but I don't know any 1031 companies that do international exchanges. So foreigners can do exchanges on property they own in the US. In fact, many of our clients don't even live here. They're you know, citizens of China or India or wherever, but they own property here. They can do 1031s because they have to pay taxes just like the rest of us do. They just couldn't exchange out of the country. They need to exchange in the country.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, well, great
Good.
info. Thanks so much, Kyle and Kelsey. If anyone wants to get in touch with him, obviously you've got the screen here, or you can feel free to reach out to Jeff or someone on the Miltenberger team and we can go ahead and directly connect you. But I'm excited to see, you know, what will come with this. So thanks so much.
Yep. Thanks, everyone.
All right, take care.
Take care.
Bye.